Development for Monday, February 17th, 2025 is now in session. Hey, thanks for being here, everybody. Got a couple quick announcements before we get into some of our other work. The first off is Keely's mom is here. Keely's mom, would you stand up and smile at everybody and wave? She's visiting from Virginia, so it's great to have her here. And it's also great to have Keely here, by the way, so thanks for letting us borrow her. Secondly, wanted to invite you all to a party. The Minnesota Corn Growers Association and the Minnesota Soybean Growers Association are having a reception tomorrow from 5 to 7:30 at the Minnesota History Center. So those are our basic announcements for the day. Now I'd like to do a bit of framing for our conversation today. Our conversation today is what legislation and legislators are supposed to do. It's about learning, about asking questions, and about solving problems. It is not in any way, shape, or form about partisan posturing. We don't do that in here. We talk through issues, we learn about them, and we come up with solutions that help our friends in agriculture and everyone who eats, which is everyone. So that's what we're doing today. We're going to talk through some of the complexity in the relationship between the federal government and the state government when it comes to agricultural policy. We will also, at some point, likely talk about potential consequences of decisions that are being made. We are doing so in the context of understanding our own budgetary priorities and how we want to navigate the next 3 months. So, folks, that's what we're doing today. To help us do that, we're going to hear from our friends at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, from our friends at Second Harvest Heartland, and also from the food group. But we will have, hopefully, a wide-ranging, larger conversation. Again, within that context of learning about our circumstances and coming up with the best way to navigate them. So, first on the docket, if our friends from the Department of Agriculture could come up here, and also Commissioner Peterson, Tom Smoody, and Ms. Bernhardt. If you could all three please come up to the table. Or actually not, because it looks like Michelle's going to take up a spot. So maybe we just start with Tom, and then we see what happens next. All right. So, Commissioner Peterson, if you would please introduce yourself, state your position and such, and commence your testimony when you're ready.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, members. Tom Peterson, Commissioner for the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. And I appreciate the opportunity to provide some context on our federal interaction with the federal government. I'm going to try to stall a little bit while Michelle's queuing up the slides here. But, you know, it is really a timely discussion, not just as we look at our federal budget, our federal interaction with federal funds, but then with some of the developments going on with the federal government currently that have been, kind of in the news and timely. So as we look at our federal funds, you can go to the next slide. We've already shown you this slide before, but just a quick reminder that of our almost $400 million budget at the Department of Agriculture for this biennium 24-25, about 10% of that is federal funds. And that's since I've been commissioner, that's about average. It's actually been down maybe a little bit by a point or two, but we've also, our budget's grown through the both state and federal government. Next slide, please. Next, I'd kind of like to just go through some of the funds that we have, and then also put some context in as you're thinking about putting a budget together for this next biennium, or for the 26, 27, 28, 29 bienniums for the Department of Agriculture. The first program we'd like to talk about is the Local Food Purchase Assistance Program. This is maybe one that we're really watching very closely. It's one that if you haven't heard about it, you'll hear more about it in the coming days, as at the current time we are unable to access some of the funding with this, and we are through the federal government. And so we are working to continue to put this together. So Local Food Purchasing Program is a program that was created to maintain and improve the food agriculture supply resiliency. Kind of as we looked at through COVID, we had another program I'll talk about in a minute that was a meat processing program. There was other different types of things where really worked to help build the food system up. Currently, we have about $1.5 to $2 million in payments to grantees that are on hold. And so these programs are programs where we work with partners the money is paid out, and then the food is donated to underserved areas. And so this is a real, concern for the department at the current time, and we are continuing to work through this program. We also are working with a local food for school program, and this is in accordance with the LFPA program. We've applied for, actually it's closer to 18 million for both the LFPA and the LFS, but this will be for the years 25 or out. And so we did sign a contract in January of 2025. But if you're thinking about like our farm to school program or something that's in our budget, this really puts more money into that type of program into the LFPA. But we are unsure what the federal government is going to do to this. Our state plan is due by April 30th. So I'm not sure if we'll know more as we get farther down, when we get targets or different things, as we're looking at farm to school and other types of food-related programs, or where we're going to be. But the timing will be really key on this, and it's really day-to-day as we look at this. Another program that we have that was a concern, we were able to, it was kind of stuck for a while, is the Resilient Food System Program. Mr. Smoody, I think, is going to talk about that in a minute. And the RFSI program was funded by a cooperative agreement with the United States government. And the program, the idea there again was to build up the middle of the food system. And so you'll hear more about Mr. Smoody's program. One of the programs that we were able to fund with the RFSI program, you may have heard of, is an oat processing plant in southern Minnesota. It's going to, instead of building in Iowa, they're going to build in Minnesota. And we were able to do a $1.5 million grant to them. A lot of people have heard about the oat mafia and really growing oats in the state, really excited about that. Those programs were on hold. We were able to start moving some of those contracts this last week, late in the week. And so we'll continue to see some positive news on that. Let's see, next slide. We also, one of the federal programs that we worked on that our state was able to get with the USDA in the last 2 years was the Meat Processing Intermediate Loan Program. Actually, Ms. Medina, we would not have gotten this without her work on getting this started, but it's a $15 million grant from the USDA that helps administer loan programs. So some of the, really to help build out our meat processing infrastructure on that smaller scale. And we're starting to see some of these plants built. One of the plants is a new halal plant being built in Wilmer, the new plant in Waban on Highway 59, a little bit out of your district, but really exciting to see. That's a low interest loan that works with the farmers, and then it backfills, and the department will have money to reloan out for different programs too as well. Another concern for us though is our meat and poultry inspection. This program is funded $2 million annually from the USDA FSIS. And that helps fund 27 staff positions at the department. One of the concerns about this would be some of those, and if all of you remember, we have 3 different types of meat processing in the state. We have USDA Equal To, which is state inspected, and then custom. The big issue, just to cut down to the problem in this slide with reduced funding, that has been coming from the federal government. They usually had provided a 50% match for us. It is now down to 31%. You've probably heard, and what we've worked on is, since I've been commissioner, is to build out the meat processing, as I just said in the previous bullet point. But to have reduced inspection means reduced hours at the plants for farmers that are looking to get those cattle into those plants. And so that's a real concern if we have to dial back on that. In my years here, not just as commissioner, but in my previous role, we've, at times, work with the state to put more state dollars into that program to have enough inspectors to meet the need that Minnesota has. So we appreciate that, and we'll continue to have that discussion with you. Our agreement with the USDA also ends on March 31st, and we hope to sign a new agreement by April 1st. I'm actually going to be in Washington, D.C. next week and trying to work on pulling that together. We also have our food inspection and safety program, which is very important. We have 10 full-time employees that are funded through a cooperative agreement. And we are very concerned about reductions in federal funding to that too. That results in food safety and inspection. So any of your food establishments that we inspect in your districts, could be a Dollar General, a grocery store, things like that. If we have to reduce inspections and times, that can be really frustrating to those businesses. And so as we look at our funding needs in that, that'll be a concern that we will be working again with the federal government and on also food outbreaks. So when we have food outbreaks, I'm trying to think what the one was that we had last week. We have really good staff that works with not just our field staff, but our lab and our folks and our processors are well known across the nation for that. We're also watching a reduction or elimination of federal funds through our lab. At this time, we don't have our many grants that we have to run all kinds of different samples and everything, whether that's grain testing, for exports, for disease, for Palmer, all these different things are very important, and we are concerned about reductions in the many grants that we have. At this time, we're not seeing any, but as those get reviewed, that potentially could be a problem, but we have quite a few different grants in that. We also have a region, it's called a RCPP, or a Regional Conservation Program, Partnership Program. This helps to provide value-added contributions and expand our collective ability to address on-farm watershed and natural resources concerns. And this requires a state match. So far, that is also just going just fine too. We also have a partnership grant with the EPA. We'll keep going through that. I'm going to skip through some of these a little quicker. I am concerned about this next grant too, and as we look at MDA receives $1.5 to $2 million a year. A lot of times we talk a lot about agriculture and corn and a lot of different things that we do, but invasive pest control is a really key part of what the department does in partnering with the DNR. And spongy moth, formerly known as gypsy moth, is a real concern in Minnesota. And if we are unsure of the funding at that, we have halted hiring our seasonal workers. That's a concern though, because that's just like emerald ash borer. If you see our forests not being treated, we see that's expanding. You have dead trees. Your cities have dead trees that they need to get a cost to take down. Your constituents have that, and so we've been able to control the spread of that, and I think it's really important that we continue to work on that. So we are working with the new administration to try to understand what we're going to do with that too as well. Another really big grant that we have that is frozen at the moment is a climate pollution reduction grant. And this provides specifically to the Department of Agriculture $9.8 million in grants for the Ag Water Quality Certification Program that you've heard about, to really boost that up, to try to bring more farmers into that and provide more resources for that. But also something that this committee has funded, so when we're looking at funds that the department or that the Senate or House may put together, is $9.7 million for equipment grants. And those have been very popular at the department. We've had quite an oversubscription of that, but we are seeing it help farmers transition to no-till and conservation farming practices. But that is kind of a game changer dollars that, as a contract that we signed with the federal government. The Pollution Control Agency is leading that grant program. And that grant program, again, has very, to me, impactful and good support from all of our agriculture groups. A couple other ones I just mentioned that are smaller but important is our specialty crop grant program that helps do research on specialty crops. Again, in Minnesota, whether that's apples, grapes, all those different things, very important. We have some of those grants open right now, and we are having some issues with those grants too, and being able to access some of the dollars in that as well. We also have a nutrient recovery anaerobic digestion project that we have not started that has $500,000 in funds that we are working with the USDA on. And then a couple more here. We have wolf depredation. We have concerns about reduced funding with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. As you know, we do the livestock indemnity for wolf payments. Currently, I learned last Friday that there's issues with the USDA Fish and Wildlife Service being able to hire or bring on the trappers for wolf trapping. And so that'll be a real concern as we get into spring calving because they are not permanent employees. Those are contracted employees. And so, you know, I'm going to be working with our federal delegation and trying to make that known as Minnesota has more wolves than the rest of the United States put together. And we do have issues, but the trappers have been something that help alleviate those concerns. So that is a very big concern for us at the moment. We also are starting our national milk testing strategy starting this next Monday. And that is with our H5N1 surveillance of avian influenza, or to put it more broadly, in milk. And so we'll be starting that. We did have some concerns, Mr. Chair, I think I messaged you about that, it took us a while to get our cooperative agreement signed with the USDA, who is mandating this testing. They will be paying for it, but we had a hard time getting our agreement signed. One of the issues when you have layoffs or you offer buyouts is that we have people that are no longer with the agency that we're contracting, so trying to get a hold of somebody. But we were able to get this moving, and we are on board hopefully to start, as I said, next Monday. And that those dollars will be reimbursed, but the state will upfront through the emergency account some of those dollars to get that ball rolling, and that's the action that we took last week. Just a reminder on the next slide, as we look at high-path avian influenza, I do want to just bring this up again because we've had a lot of discussions since even the last time I testified on this. We have, seen the virus move into Nevada, which is the same virus that we currently have here in Minnesota in dairy cows in Nevada, and now yesterday into Arizona. And we are, as we worry about cases that we're seeing in Ohio and New York, what does the bird migration bring to us in the coming weeks? And so when we look at this map, and we do have concerns. We did have a positive case in Crow Wing County just this last week in a backyard flock, so we know the virus is circulating in Minnesota, and and that's why we are going forward with the testing as quickly as we can. And just a reminder, the ag emergency account here is the latest balance that we have, and you can see we actually do probably have some dollars we'll be able to get back from the federal account, but it just shows you kind of how we spend that, what the dollar amount is, and what we've been spending on. The most of it is for contracting, for depopulating, assisting in depopulating farms, and helping those independent farmers that need to be depopulated. I'm going to let, Ms. Medina is going to cover the board's federal dollars with the last two slides.
Yes, Mr. Chair and committee members, for the record, my name is Michelle Medina, and I serve as Director of Government Relations for the Minnesota Department of Agriculture and the Minnesota Board of Animal Health. So for federal funding for the Board of Animal Health, they received about, in fiscal year 24, approximately 70% of the board's budget came from federal funding. This doesn't include the field staff work that USDA staff does in collaboration with the board. USDA helps with all of our programs except the companion animal, or except for the dog and cat breeder, that's all Board of Animal Health work, but all of our other programs, such as the Farm Survey Program for animal disease investigations, import violations, reportable disease investigations, quarantines, all of those are done in conjunction with the USDA staff. So that's about $1.3-ish million a year as we get from the federal government. All of the federal funding for the board is from USDA APHIS, and this is the form of cooperative agreements, so that means that we expend money and then we're reimbursed by the USDA. If this funding was eliminated or reduced, the board would have a rather large budget deficit, particularly in staffing and diminished disease response capabilities. The board does work collaboratively with the USDA field staff to ensure uniform coverage of the state and respond to diseases. The workload is approximately about 2/3 of the board staff and 1/3 USDA staff, so we rely pretty heavily on them for helping get our work done. The board has 7 veterinarians and 5 ag advisors, and the USDA has 7 veterinarians and 4 animal health technicians in the field in Minnesota. So we kind of share field staff around the state. The board is currently responding to 3 different disease events: avian metapneumovirus, high path in poultry, and H5N1 in cattle. And another concern too is just lab capacity at our veterinary diagnostic lab here at the U of M, at our Minnesota poultry testing lab up in Wilmer, and at the different non-labs across the nation. So having access to those labs and having them function on time is really important in this. And I'll note too that we have heard that 2 of the USDA staff that we work with here in Minnesota have already been dismissed with the probationary. So we're down 2 staff we know already within USDA in the state.
And And Mr. Chair, one more point, just kind of to Ms. Medina's last point was, I did want to just mention the other things or considerations in the federal government is that they do have a March 14th date to reset their budget, or we face a shutdown, which is something that we go through quite often. But we also, are trying to work through the layoffs or the probationary period layoffs in last week, because we've seen FSA, county offices, loan offices. I understand some of those folks may be hired back, but our NRCS, field offices, probationary employees. I mentioned Wildlife Services, APHIS, and then the national and the labs, as Ms. Medina said. So we're trying to work through that, work with our congressional delegation. I think that the Trump administration has said that, some of these either grants or positions are on a case-by-case basis. And I think for a lot of these, we can make a case. And I feel like that's my job as a Commissioner of Agriculture, work with our congressional delegation to make the case for the impacts that they be reconsidered or the grants be allowed to open. And, I understand that, taking a look at those to see what they do and everything, and a lot of the ones we've been able to move forward on the grants. But the positions, I will say are concerning, and we'll see how this plays out. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Peterson and Ms. Medina. I do have a couple questions just for you, and I'm assuming that the members might as well. Could you characterize your communication with the federal government? Because I think one of the things we're hearing is a lot of uncertainty. Are you able to get kind of reliable updates or predictions of when that uncertainty might be resolved? So, for example, this program, we're not sure if it's going to be frozen or not, but we'll tell you in 2 weeks. Or is that not, how has that been going, I guess is a way of putting it?
Mr. Chairman and members, I'd say slow. But keep in mind too, that anytime you have an administration changeover, sure, you're going to have new people, and you're going to have, but it's been, some of the things we'd like to go quicker, whether that's dealing with avian influenza, and not sure or knowing. And so, and some of the pieces have been, not being able to have the same person there that we've always worked with or get a hold of that person. And so as we've seen a buyout or people take a buyout or people leave federal government, that has been a concern. But, we have great staff people. We've used our congressional delegation, both parties, to work through that. And they've been super helpful. So again, there's a couple that we're continuing to work through, but we've been able to, for the most part, but it's been difficult. Our staff has spent many hours and lots of time getting through that, but we'll just have to keep working on it.
Thank you, Commissioner. I have a couple more questions for you still. For the meat and poultry inspection resources that are necessary, which meats are we talking about, and where are they going? Are these meats that are being exported to other countries or out of state, or is it turkey and pork and cattle, all those kinds of things?
Mr. Chair and members, these would be like our state inspected plants. So this would be meat that's staying in state. So the local locker plants that are selling maybe to a local restaurant. They have a counter facing. They maybe do direct sales, things like that. And so that's a primary. But we know, when I took over as commissioner, At that time, the wait was 6 months sometimes to get a spot in one of these plants. And a lot of times that had to do with a room, but also an inspector, and so that was something that we've continued to build out, but then COVID made it even worse. Now we've been able to start catching up on that. And so, again, that would be a concern. And it is kind of, and I'll say even with the previous administration, cut back on this. And so we were frustrated with the previous administration as well, because at one time you're building out with grants and everything, but at the same time you're cutting back the other part that's almost as equally important. So, we're going to have to keep, trying to make a case for that, or as we look into our budget, we're working with M&B and the governor's office on that. We have to decide to cut back or try to rearrange funds to make that something that the, consumers and the farmers have made a top priority.
Thank you, Commissioner Peters. So we're sort of talking about smaller or more local folks who'd be the ones who'd be hurt most by this.
Yes.
Who, and I appreciate your clarification, who already have been hurt by the past administration's disposition of funds around this area. Thank you. So you also were talking a little bit about, you and I were talking about this at one point, about Colorado's response to H5N1 in dairy. And if I recall correctly, you sort of characterized it as they were able to kind of test themselves out of the problem. Does that mean that we would be in a position, if we deployed the appropriate resources, to actually be in a similar situation? Is that how you would consider it?
Mr. Chair, members, yes. And so talking about the milk testing for H5N1 or avian influenza, Colorado this summer, they only have 100 dairy farms in the state. Just a reminder, again, we have about 1,700 going back to last week. So think about that. They have 100. They had positive cases in 70 of their dairy herds. So think about that if that happened in Minnesota, and we had it in 70% of our herds, what that would be like. And that happened all in about a 2-month span for them. And, our problem is that a lot of our poultry is where our dairy is. And so it's fatal, again, to our poultry farms. And everybody's whipped up about the price of eggs and everything else. That's why we take an aggressive approach at trying to, understand this, but also understand that the farmers and work with them very closely. That, and I feel a lot of calls from farmers, but I feel like the farmers have come on board on the testing and understand that, because they're going to see, if they have a positive case, they're going to see a drop in milk production and maybe 20%, maybe a little more. They may see a fatality in a cow or two if they have a comorbidity, something like that. But the fact of the matter is, it could be really painful for Minnesota if we were to get into a situation like Colorado or California is dealing with. As I said, Governor Newsom declared a state of emergency over this because of the spread, again, in California, 700 out of their 900 dairies. So Colorado was the first state to really implement a mandatory testing program of all the dairy farms to understand where it is, to isolate it, to communicate with the producers. And they were free of it within a couple of months. The virus was gone. And so that told me and a lot of the folks that this is the way to go, and and visiting with it. I always want to remind people that even with the virus, pasteurization, again, kills the virus. Those farmers could still ship their milk. They could still make their money and their dollars, but it has to be pasteurized. And so that's why, the federal government, I think is why they went down this road of the mandatory milk testing. And so, again, we'll be starting that on Monday, a week from today.
Thank you, Commissioner Beeson. Members, do we have any questions for MDA? Senator Kunish? Senator Kunish.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We did talk about the effect of the viruses on communities not so long ago, and I'm wondering, do you know if the CDC is doing anything, or they have the capability to begin any kind of guidance or support for that?
Commissioner Peterson?
Mr. Chair and Senator Kunish, I'm going to just bring it more locally with our Department of Health and how we work on it in our state, which is, guided by the CDC, is when we have a positive case in Minnesota, the Department of Health does work with that farm and does offer testing to the farm workers and the farmers themselves. And Minnesota probably has one of the best uptakes. I think we work very closely with the Department of Health. For example, this summer, we did have 9 positive cases in dairy farms of H5N1. And the Department of Health offered the testing. Many times that's off-site. The workers come in, get tested. I think we had done a couple hundred tests, which is was pretty good, and we did not find the virus at that time. In those workers. Found other viruses and things like that, which is, that they had COVID or another type of flu. But the idea is that that's something that in our plan in Minnesota, we work very closely with that. The other thing our Department of Health does that Minnesota has had the best uptake on is that they offer free PPE to those farms. And so any farm in the state, we have a national stockpile where you can get gloves, masks, but the big thing is goggles, and a lot of people just don't like wearing goggles on the farm. I don't, and so, but that is one of the entryways we've seen, in the virus is through the eyes, and so conjunctivitis is one thing that has been quite prevalent in the workers that they've seen. So again, that work so far has been maintained. We'll see how that goes, but for our state, that's kind of how we've been working.
Senator Kunish?
So last week, I heard that at least 15% of the federal employees had been laid off. If 15% of the CDC, or if the CDC is shut down, where does Minnesota go for its guidance? Are we self-sufficient to be able to manage this influenza?
Commissioner Peterson?
Mr. Chair and Senator Kunish, I wouldn't be an expert on the CDC and what happens there. What I would go by is the work that we do, again, with our Department of Health, and that would be who we, would continue to work with. That is our plan. I know the CDC, the Department of Health works closely with the CDC, and I know that they've been tracking that as we track the layoffs or retirements or pieces with the USDA, and then we do regular check-ins weekly in different contexts with the Department of Health to discuss those plans and what, the latest developments are, what we're doing. But those are the discussions that we're having, not just on the CDC side, but the USDA side. So, what happens if we don't have this person in place? Ms. Medina referenced that we're, down veterinarians or workers. We're still trying to establish what that will mean to the future of our program. And so it's going to be like a day-to-day type of thing, but we know we'll know with what works for Minnesota, but also what resources we have too will be key.
Senator Kunish?
Yep. I have another question I have about the ag emergency account. You have a very slim balance there. I guess my question is like, what would happen if these dollars run out? For example, there's a portion, and I don't know the portion, you get supplies, you get travel, you get HPAI response contractors and overtime from the federal government. If all of those things were to go away, the funding were to go away, and Minnesota didn't allocate enough dollars for this emergency account, like what would happen if there was a horrible emergency and, with this slim balance, it was gone in a blink, what would happen?
Commissioner Peterson?
Mr. Chair and Senator Kunish, welcome to what I wake up to at 3 o'clock in the morning. That's like, and you think about, we used to have, at one point, the legislature had put $4 million balance in this, but we've been slowly spending it down and watching that. We've had other ag emergencies over the years. And then we try to be as, judicious as we can with those dollars and really watch that spending. You can see in the slide where the stars are next to, a lot of those are reimbursed by the federal government that you're mentioning. But, even just this week, the new administration also said that we may be looking at, not depopulating birds. And so we're trying to understand what that would mean, and so does that mean we wouldn't pay to help the farmers in those type of situations, or how would that work? And so this is kind of a day-to-day, piece. So what I've looked at is what we've had to do in the past. In 2020, when we had COVID, and we did end up putting down a lot of dollars at that time, I did go to the administration. Senator Westrom was involved at that time, and the leaders, and we were able to get $11 million to depopulate almost 500,000 hogs, millions of turkeys and chickens, and at that time, we were able to use CARES dollars through the federal government that we had through COVID. Of the $11 million, we were able to return quite a bit of that to the state to be used for other funds. And so we took quite a bit of care and dollars. So I've looked at our state emergency account, and spent time on that. And I don't know if that would be a good fit, or would we have to go while you're in session to it, while we're in session, if something like this happened, like it did in California, we've done this before. We've had floods and other things. You pass a bill and say like, oh, this is on fire. We have 300 cases. We would probably go some kind of route like that and say, here's our best idea of what we need right now. And so, yeah, we're having all those discussions all the time and trying to figure that out as well.
Senator Kunish?
Nope. One last question. Is it true that the avian flu has also passed into cats, house cats?
Commissioner
Is that
Peterson?
another widespread spreader?
Commissioner Peterson.
Mr. Chair and Senator Kunish, that is correct. It is not just cats, it's up to other species too as well. And so that is a concern as well. And so, we're continuing to, update the Board of Animal Health's website and others for folks to have, discussions on that. Farmers have seen that on their farms, or other pieces too, but we have seen it in both domestic and wild cats.
Senator Gustafson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in addition to being concerned about the avian flu and how that's impacting not just farmers, but just, as a parent myself and thinking about facing another pandemic, I have a lot of concerns. So I'm glad most of those questions got answered. Switching gears a little bit, I'm thinking about the farmers here in Minnesota and how the uncertainty that's constantly coming out of the federal government right now. I'm not sure how much they realize in Washington, D.C., how those decisions or lack of decisions or impulsive decisions are impacting us and our state budget, and mostly the farmers. So thinking about a couple of things. Knowing that there might be tariffs, there might not be, the federal funds are frozen and then they're unfrozen, and just the uncertainty. How long can farmers hold off on planting decisions? And are there, sorry, one more thing, and then probably in the same answer, are there specific regions of Minnesota that we think might be more vulnerable to a potential trade war than others?
Commissioner Peterson.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Gustafson, a few topics in there that are really, kind of timely and everything. First, I just say that we are concerned about the agriculture economy in Minnesota. I think I mentioned last week or 2 weeks ago when I was testifying that the, January Farmer Lender Mediation Report shows that we have 7 times the amount of mediations in January, well over 300 this January than we did a year ago, where we had less than 50. We know calls to our farm advocate line are very high. We know, are hearing from the Attorney General's office questions about bankruptcies, that these are very big concerns, especially on the crop side and the poultry side. The cattle market, though, right now is very strong. Dairy is actually, doing okay. So there are some sectors that are doing just fine. And so that is something we continue to think. But for individual farmers, some of the programs that they might be in that are on hold right now with the NRCS, which is kind of the conservation arm of the USDA, some farmers have very big grants tied up in this where they didn't know if the money was coming from the CCC or the IRA or the ARPA or whatever fund it's coming from. They just signed a contract with the federal government to put a project on to make their farm bigger. And then in most cases, they leveraged and put a couple of times that money of their own into this and their sweat equity, and now these projects are on hold. And so those are a lot of the questions that we'll see what happens, because for some farmers, that's going to be a problem. One of the things that we have in the slide is the Local Food Purchase Assistance Program, which has been very successful to help a lot of our new and emerging farmers. So that could be, a lot of our Hmong, Somali, our veteran farmers, a lot of our newer farmers that are starting out. They're, going to be starting vegetables soon in their greenhouses and gardens, like within days in some cases, and trying to plan, what should I order? What should I plant? How much work should I put into it? Is this LFPA program going to be there? And so that's, again, what we're trying to relay to that. And then to trade, I think, it's kind of unknown at this point. Our job is to, again, as commissioner, what I've been trying to do is meet with our biggest trading partners of Canada and Mexico. Last week, we hosted the trade minister from Saskatchewan. We hosted groups from Alberta. Manitoba is our biggest trading partner. We import almost 1 million isoweens or piglets from Manitoba a year. A lot of our processing depends on that. And there's also reasons for that, that are disease related, that they don't have some of the diseases we have in Canada. So it's beneficial from us to have a breeding program with areas from that aren't as concentrated in southern Minnesota. And that's why we built this system. And but you could have biofuels. Our corn exports have really grown to Canada and to Mexico. Our ham exports to Mexico. These are all big things that are incredibly important. And then one other thing I'd say is we have our trade agreement, which a lot of people were forgetting. We had NAFTA for many years, and President Trump did renegotiate and did negotiate the trade agreement we have now with Canada and Mexico, which is the USMCA. And to me, that's been beneficial to the United States in cases. We just had a case against Mexico on GE corn, and we've had dairy disputes. That is up for renegotiation in 2026. And so as we look at this, we'll see what happens. But that being said, I'm, like I said, I'll be in DC next week, and I have the opportunity to sit down with some of our trade advisors in the new administration that I know, and make a case for a lot of these things. And again, they've said that a lot of these tariffs and things may be on a case-by-case basis. And so we'll see what happens. But I think we're in for an interesting time, but we have a good product in Minnesota. We have a quality crops that we can sell, and, we'll continue to advocate to try to get as many of those goods out there as we can.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, follow-up?
Senator Gustafson.
Thank you. So hearing the uncertainty on crops and how that's already putting added pressure on farmers who did not need the added pressure, it's already an extremely stressful job. Thinking about crops and protecting, every farm is a small business too, has the federal freeze impacted farmers' access to crop insurance options?
Commissioner Peterson.
Mr. Chair and Senator Gustafson, I would say not at the moment.
Senator Gustafson.
No follow-up, thank you.
Members of the questions for our friends at MDA. Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Peterson, you talked about the ag emergency account. I don't know if there's anything in statute that says we should not allow that emergency account to go so low that we are having to come back on a regular basis. Would you have an estimate of what, in your past years of experience with needs, have a plateau or a ceiling where that emergency account should be at?
Commissioner Peterson.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Anderson, arbitrarily, no, but I slept a lot better when it was above like 3 million, just being, and again, we really don't know. I mean, if you think about avian influenza, when we first had it in 2022, we had over 100 cases that year, and we were in session then, and we worked with Senator Westrom and others to build that up and put that together. 2023, we had 2 cases, and they were in backyard flocks in the spring. But then in the fall, we got hammered. I think it was first day of the state fair. We got 40-some cases. And then it again returned again in next year, and then this year we added the dairy. So again, not sure, but I feel like we've been able to manage those dollars, and so that's something that we've been, talking about. The governor's office has been, in discussions with us about what's the appropriate amount to have in there. But at the end of the day, it's really hard to say, but we did sleep better when it was, it gives us, one of the things that it does, that we have an excellent, if I might say, emergency manager at our department, Lucy Hunt, and what she has, unfortunately, is experience with this. So Minnesota, we have equipment. We watch for supplies when they're on sale, believe it or not, whether that's equipment to help with those depopulations or to help with different pieces that our folks might need or our companies in Minnesota might need, that we're able to maybe even rent out to other states and actually have made income back. But we're very prepared. And so it's hard to say, but that would be like, some kind of ballpark that I would say.
Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if legislation was to come forward requiring you to have an emergency account, you're saying $4 million. I mean, and it depends upon each year. The way things have been going the last 4, 5, 6 years is you can't predict it. But for us as legislators to be able to say, we really need to keep these things that are popping up without explanation. So where's it coming from? And so, but for us to kind of mandate something so that you have something that you don't have to be worried about and come back and say every year, oh man, we're really out of money.
Commissioner Peterson.
Yep, Mr. Chair, and and Senator Anderson, you reminded me another piece too, is that we've spent a lot of time focusing on avian influenza, but we have African swine fever, which is a very big concern for our pork producers that is on our shores in Haiti, and if that were to ever get to, so we do drills with that dollars too, so that we're prepared if that could happen tomorrow, like literally, and we hope it never does, but that or foot and mouth disease is also another big concern, and so we have drills, we have equipment, we have all kinds of things that keep Minnesota prepared, for those. So the Ag Emergency Account was also designed to not just help us address like the ongoing things that we have right now, but also prepare for those. So it is always helpful. I understand resources, are tight, but that, is something that, we are appreciative that we have, that other states don't have that.
Senator Anderson.
So, Mr. Chair, Mr. Peterson, you're very kind in not saying you need this, but I'm thinking that we do need this, and I think we need to give you some comfort, your people comfort, the farmers, the people that raise food, raise animals here, that you have the opportunity, and you've been doing well as far as managing and being able to come up with the resources needed, but be able to be feeling secure in your own, wherever that may be, from X to Y to Z, from ABC to D, I think that it might be a good idea for us to think about that.
Thank you, Senator Anderson. I agree, and actually just moments ago, I just wrote to Commissioner Peterson and Ms. Medina to see if we could find a way to steal from the Natural Disaster Emergency Fund right now. But dedicated resources towards emergency responses in agriculture is an area that I think that the state needs to take seriously. So I appreciate your point of view. Senator Kupek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This afternoon, I had some folks from Lutheran Social Services were in my office, and they had already had some programs that they were supposed to get grants for, that they were allotted back in the fall, and that money had not come into them yet. And now they're finding out that they are on the hook for that, and that money is not going to be coming. So is there anything within the ag department that you have kind of already paid for, that you expected to get money for, that is now no longer coming, that you are on the hook for?
Commissioner Peterson.
Senator Putnam and Senator Kupek, that's a really good question that we are watching very carefully because, you know, of those federally funded dollars, you know, the Department of Agriculture, we don't have like a pot of money that, you know, we're going to backfill those dollars, you know, so that's why on some of these we have slowed down or we've delayed payments, you know, because we don't have those dollars to magically appear to make those payments. And so those are discussions, Mr. Chair, and committees that we're going to have with you if this goes on longer into it as we look at priorities within whether it's the agency or that. So we've been able to make payments on the things that we can make payments on, but we also have to be very carefully that we don't be spending money that we don't have at the department, in my mind. And so that is a piece that we're having those discussions with the governor's office, within our own agency. What kind of dollars do we have? What are our obligations? And those are tough right now. And so it's been really hard, and again, those are discussions, again, we have with our Attorney General's office, with our general counsel, to make sure that we, with our partners too as well. There's a lot of partners right now that are depending on those dollars. You're going to hear in a minute, people that have made decisions on businesses, on farms, who didn't know where the money was coming from. They just, signed up for a grant and a program, and now, it's the promise that was made is not there. And so we'll, keep working on it, but it's right as of now, we do have some things that we're, that we will need to be paying soon, but we are continuing to work through that.
Senator Kupek.
On kind of switching topics here, I've got like three kind of rando very variety of questions. In terms of federal funding for USAID, and I've heard from some commodity groups, like some kind of rough numbers. Do you have an idea what the federal government's impact for USAID money is to Minnesota producers?
Commissioner Peterson.
Mr. Chair and members, we could get you what we know. We do have something that we prepared. I don't have it on me at the moment. I will say, as we've looked into it, the main impacts for our state are really up in your district. It's wheat and edible beans. And so some in Senator Westrum's district, those are edible beans, believe it or not, are a big user of USAID. We also have some of our bigger co-ops or companies, whether that's Cargill, Land O'Lakes, that maybe have a role in working through that too as well. And so they've also shared some of the information, and we could get that to the committee as well.
Senator Kupek.
And one last question, just because eventually everything in my district has to circle back to sustainable aviation fuel. Not sugar beets this time. Sorry. It was one of the two. You were guessing correctly. But in terms of, like last week, we had bills funding some of the research at the University of Minnesota. We've been a leader in this area. Do you have any sense of what kind of impact that would have, first of all, on grants and money for ag research at the University of Minnesota, and then specifically around sustainable aviation fuel?
Commissioner Peterson.
Chair Putnam and Senator Kupek, we're still trying to really work on that. With sustainable aviation fuel, we're really working on the federal tax credits, and the future of that would be the first big concern. But you raised an interesting question on the research, and I encourage you to have a discussion with the University of Minnesota and folks there that are facing whether that's furloughs or been told they're done. That's a concern on a lot of our research that we're doing there. I've also understand pressure on our research stations that we have and funding for those in the rural areas too as well. But again, I don't have any concrete details. We're still kind of putting this all together. Things kind of slowed down a little bit today since it's a federal holiday, which is actually okay for a day. So, but again, there's a lot of information coming. But I am concerned about the research component to that as well. We're still trying to sort that out.
Senator Kubik? Senator Westrom?
Mr. Chair, just going back to one of the comments you made earlier about testing milk, if I understood you correctly, in Minnesota, and you're trying to get that started, that's what the other states did. What do you accomplish? What do we accomplish by that? What's the reason if all pasteurized milk is basically safe? How is testing going to get us further down the road faster? Into what? What are we trying to get further down the road faster to?
Commissioner Peterson?
Mr. Chairman and Senator, great question. We're trying to find out where the virus is and if we have it. Nevada, for example, they didn't know they had it. They started their testing program. Again, like I said, they have 23 dairies. They ended up finding it in one dairy, and they thought, oh, it's a one-off. The next day, they had it in 6, but they were able to isolate, find out where they are, and act quickly. And that is the same thing. Arizona yesterday or Saturday didn't know they had it. They started their testing program. They found it. But the idea is that in Nevada, it escalated quickly. And again, being able to find it, talk to the producers, get a case manager going, get the best practices in place on those dairies to help control the virus, whether that's pasteurizing the milk going to the calves, things like that help contain the virus, limiting who's coming on and off of those farms. What that also does is help save our poultry farms. It helps save our cats. It helps save our workers, from getting sick. And so this is the important piece that we'll be able to do. And again, trying to do it in a way, and, having been a farmer myself, it's not something I'd want to have, necessarily when somebody first says, we're going to test this and we're going to do that. Working through a system that's already exists, that the milk tests that we already pull, we're going to add a test to that. There's no cost to the farmer. Again, if they have the virus, they're going to pasteurization, they can sell their milk. I will say too, again, that's pasteurized milk. We do have raw milk sales in the state. We do have a lot of raw milk sales, and we have put out, an advisory to our folks that sell raw milk to make sure if you have sick cows, pull those out right away. A lot of the farmers, I was with the raw milk farmer yesterday, and he assured me the best practices. He pulls a cow every time it has mastitis or any inkling of that. Because again, the customer is the important thing. We also encourage those folks that buy or purchase raw milk to have that conversation with their farmer. What is their practice for, having a sick cow? Because you did see folks get sick in California from consuming raw milk.
Senator Westrom?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess just the testing that you're talking about then, is that basically the testing the bulk trucks do each time they come and pick up the milk? Is it DHIA test every month? What is that? Which testing are we talking about?
Commissioner Peterson?
No, and Chair Putnam and Senator, we'll be testing each farm just like we test the samples when the milk is picked up at the farm. That way we know the farm. Some states originally you could test like the silo at the plant. Well, that wouldn't tell us where it was. It would tell us it was in the area where it was maybe picked up. And so that's why a lot of states and why Minnesota is going to farm sampling, because we'll be able to tell or isolate a lot quicker where that is. And so that, I forgot the other part of your question.
Well, I think that's kind of the basic part. DHIA is the other
yes,
testing.
yeah.
But basically, are we adding a new test, or is it just the milk sample that's coming typically with the bulk truck drivers? I grew up on a dairy farm. I recall they usually pull a little bottle every time out of the bulk tank, and then they'd mark down where it came from, and that's the testing. Or is this a whole new testing that's going to be on each farm now?
Yeah, and, Mr. Chair and Senator, yeah. And so instead of just like bacteria and stuff, they'll be also adding this test to that. And so that is the same, we're just adding that onto it. And then we're using existing labs in many cases that already do that, and working with the labs that already test milk in Minnesota. And so they'll be partnering with the department on that.
Senator Westrom. Members, any last questions for our friends from MDA? Seeing none. Thanks very much, Commissioner Peterson and Ms. Medina. And now we want to hear from some farmers. If we could get Mr. Barnstable to come up, please, and Ms. Bernhardt, excuse me. And Mr. Smoody, if you would please state your name for the record and commence your testimony when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair Putman and members of the committee. My name is Tom Smoody for the record. My wife Jenny and I farm up in Piers, Minnesota, and we have beef. We finish all the way through our calves all the way to finish. We process some USDA and state, so we do direct to consumer. We have a few restaurants that use our beef. And then we do sell hamburger into the school system as well. So we have corn, soybeans, sunflowers, and our beef on the farm. As you know, Chair, you've been to our farm in the past. I think it was right when you started as Agriculture Chair. So I guess the topic of this hearing to talk about the project that we're really excited about, and the one that's unfortunately affected by the federal funding freeze. Last year, we were awarded a grant of $530,000 from the RFI or SI grant from USDA and administered from the MDA. This was to allow us to increase our production for our line of byproduct from sunflowers. So we're crushing the sunflowers for oil and byproduct. So we're able to separate our byproduct into a fiber and a protein. And this line is to increase from 150,000 pounds annually all the way to taking our full capacity, and we'll be able to process all 600,000 or 6 million pounds through this new system. It's a reimbursement grant, so we went out and got a loan, or a temporary loan, to cover everything. So we ordered and put a personal guarantee on this, and our portion will be right around $250,000 out of our pocket. So we ordered everything, or most of it already. It's some of the stuff as it already came in, and that we paid with off our loan, our temporary loan. So I guess the challenge is we tore out our line now. We're not making any product. It's going to push us back for the start of getting that protein made, bagged, and to our end users. It's just the what, I don't know what to do, I guess. So we're holding on. I guess we're waiting to see what can happen, and I guess we've had really good support from you guys. It's a huge credit for Commissioner Peterson, Deputy Commissioner, and MDA for helping us. And it looks like things are starting to move. So we'll see where it goes here. So I got Brady is from 7 Sundays. he is our end user. So he's the driver behind all this protein, and it's, I think we started out, I think we met about 4 years ago probably. It started out with a 50-pound bag, and now it's all semi-loads is what we're providing Brady for his 7 Sundays cereal. So I guess Brady can take it over from here if he wants to say. I guess I brought Brady with to, it's not just me. It's the consumer, it's the end user to the consumer for the food products. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smoody. And again, personally, thank you very much for hosting us that was my first sort of event with the agricultural community, and it was as open and as accessible and inclusive as it was because you hosted us.
Thank you,
So
Chair.
thank you for that and for that education. So Mr. Barnstable, if you would please state your full name for the record and commence your testimony when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair Putnam and members of the committee. For the record, as Tom said, my name is Brady Barnstable. I'm not a farmer. I'm a co-founder of 7 Sundays. I started the brand with my wife, Hannah, back in 2011 at a Minneapolis farmers market. I'll pause and mention that the snacks in front of you are our upcycled sunflower cereal snackies. It's like a snack pack version that's available in Costco. That sunflower cereal is made from the upcycled sunflower protein that Tom makes for us at Midwest Processors. A little background on our company. After an inspirational honeymoon in New Zealand, Hannah and I saw an opportunity to not just change the cereal aisle in the U.S. for the better, but also have an impact on the larger food system by making cereals that restore both the health of people and the planet. That, to us, started with working directly with farmers and having transparency throughout our supply chain, unwinding a lot of the over-industrialized practices that are currently in our agricultural system. After 8 challenging and unprofitable years while raising a family of our own, our make-or-break moment came in 2020 when I had met Tom through the MDA, actually, Expo West trade show that MDA helps us attend. And he had brought this idea of a sunflower protein using the leftovers of his cold-pressed sunflower oil. And we were coming at it from a way to expand into the cereal aisle from our original products, which were muesli, into a puffed cereal using Tom's protein as the flagship ingredient. So with the help of Tom, we launched the first of its kind upcycled cereal. And in the last 4 years, it has truly transformed our business. We've over doubled in size each year for the last 4 years. We've become one of the top selling natural food brands in the US in the cereal aisle, one of the top selling cereals in Whole Foods. In 2024 alone, we sold the equivalent of 6 million bowls of cereal, 60 million bowls of cereal, added 4,000 new points of distribution, 10 employees, supported 500 acres of regenerative sunflowers, all grown in Minnesota, all while upcycling nearly 1 million pounds of nutritious sunflower protein. In 2025, our plan is to continue this growth, double again in size, and contract 2,000 acres of regeneratively grown Minnesota sunflowers. I'll also mention, because Tom Peterson brought it up, that we are also part of the oat mafia, and we are very much looking forward to the Green Acres oat mill that's going up in Albert Lea. So mission accomplished, right? Far from it. We are still a relatively small team and a very small player in the larger cereal aisle. Our growth is immensely challenging on our team and our suppliers. The RFSI grant that Tom in Midwest Processors was awarded last year will allow Tom to scale his business alongside ours and make his business viable over the long term. And there's no time to waste. We have commitments from major retailers like Target, Walmart, Costco, major players in the grocery market in the U.S. Due to the unique nature of this supply chain, the fact that it's upcycled, we don't really have a plan B This is Tom's baby. We've worked alongside him in a collaborative effort, and hope that this project, which features two entrepreneurial families, a farmer and a food brand, coming together to bring a healthier cereal to consumers, is an example that the state can use as a model, as a success story, and other food companies can follow in our footsteps. So yeah, I appreciate your attention on our project and the story, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Monticello and Mr. Smoody. And I don't know if this is legal or not, but fantastic snacks. Really, really good stuff. Thanks for sharing with us today. And I also, again, Mr. Smoody, as I texted you a couple days ago, will always have a soft spot in my heart for your popcorn because it was our dear friend Carrie Dezek's absolute favorite food.
Thank you.
Again, thank you both for being here. And also thank you for demonstrating how what impacts one of us impacts all of us. And that we're connected in the work we do in Minnesota agriculture. Members, do you have questions for Mr. Smoody or Mr. Barnstable? Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The snacks that you passed out here, how, because it says here, can be used until February 4th, a year from now, 2026. What is it that, I'm looking for ingredients in here that would preserve that to allow that to stay fresh or viable that long?
Senator Anderson, are you looking for further preservation yourself, perhaps? Yeah. Mr. Barnstable.
Chair Putnam and Senator Anderson, there's actually no preservatives in the product. It's a matter of drying the product out into a certain moisture level and then packaging it in a way that allows no oxygen transfer. And because the product is dry, it has a year shelf life. So,
Thank you.
Members, any other questions? Senator Kupek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I don't know if this is going to be permissible, but could I ask a question about something that's going to be up for us on Wednesday of one of our testifiers here?
I think we make the rules.
Foreshadowing?
So feel free. Spoiler coming.
So, I'd like to ask Mr. Smoody, we're going to have on Wednesday, we have a bill about making some modifications to grain buying process and the amount of maybe money you have to spend on a CPA or whatever. And I understand maybe you have a little, you're dealing with some of this right now yourself. So could just inform us of where that process is for you.
Senator Kupek, I think that's a totally appropriate and in fact necessary question because we're talking about the viability of farmers in the state of Minnesota. So Mr. Smoody, if you would please.
Thank you, Chair and Senator Kopik. So about 3 weeks ago, we got a cease and desist order. So we're buying seed from a licensed grain buyer with a bond that'll cover Minnesota, and if we do buy it from other states right around us. So we stopped our operations. So we just started running this morning, actually. We got, everything kind of came together here. By the time we got the seed flowing again, we had about 2 weeks into it. So take that times $13,000 a day. We went and took out another $200,000 loan because of it to cover our expenses. It's just, every day that goes by, it just accrues a lot of debt. So fast, and with all the employees, and what do you do with employees when everybody's standing there doing nothing when we have no seed? So, and then in turn, that affects Brady. Brady helped us out to get everything rolling again because he's got his dates that he has to have his protein ready. We need 10 semi-loads ready by this coming Wednesday, starting for processing. So it's a big deal. So we went through, we got our bond, we worked with the bank. They couldn't believe how fast we went, and we told them, here's the keys, or you want the keys or give us a bond. So we got a bond. So I guess I was under the understanding for 14 years already that we did not need a grain buying license. No one's ever told me that through all the people that I know. So I get it, right? But wow. I mean, I didn't see this coming, I guess. There's just a couple, that was one day, and the next day we found out about the grant. So it was just a really bad couple weeks here, so. But we're working through it. We got a good bank behind us to climb out of this, so we did get the grant, or the grain buyer's license, it's resolved, everything's done. I think we were talking about, we're a small player. We're not an ADM, we're not, it's gonna cost us, I'm gonna say about 10,000 a year between the licensing and the auditing. So we're gonna have to find a new auditor or a new person to do our taxes to audit from now. It's hard to find just a tax person in general right now, but, so we're looking for that. So we're working, is there something maybe on the smaller scale? Is there a dollar amount, you know, where is that to do a P&L or like just a basic, here's our books? I mean, is there something like that, I guess, is what I think you guys were gonna propose, the way Tom made it sound.
Thank you, Mr. Smitty. Senator Kupek?
Yeah, just foreshadowing, it's coming Wednesday.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Senator Kunish?
Thank you. And Mr. Smoody, your story sounds horrific. I really, really, really feel for you. To have one day this and one day that, you know, just like the commissioner. You just wonder how people get to the next day, to the next day, to the next day. Would you say that your situation is unique? Or would you say that there are a lot of small entrepreneurs, small egg groups such as yours that are seeing these roadblocks pop up every single day or, you know, more frequently, where down the road there could be a real calamity of bankruptcy and small businesses such as yourselves possibly going under? And what could we do to help prevent that?
Mr. Smitty?
Thank you, Chair, Senator Kunish. I would say every entrepreneur goes to bed wondering what's tomorrow going to bring. It's just plain and simple, I would say, right? Mm-hmm. When that all happened, my wife was crying, like, are we even going to have a house to sleep in tomorrow? I mean, it's real money. And as you get bigger, we're not big. I mean, but when you start playing with millions of dollars, it's real money and it can go fast. You get backed into a corner. Basically I said, I need a round room here pretty soon. I can't get backed into a corner again. It just seems like you get to a certain point and all of a sudden you go again and everything's going great, and then all of a sudden it just falls apart. And I think it's every entrepreneur. We started with nothing. I mean, it was literally nothing. I quit my job, Jenny quit her job, full-time jobs, to do this and farm. And it's been tough, I'll be honest. I mean, it always looks good from the outside, right? I was like, oh, he's doing great. But it's tough. So I don't have an answer of what you can do. I guess fair prices is probably the biggest thing. If you have a fair price like beef is today, it's perfect. Corn at $3.30, you go backwards fast. You know, programs, I don't know. It's hard to explain. You should not rely on government payments. If you had a fair price for everything, you wouldn't need government payments. Maybe the only fallback would be, and we have insurance for drought. Drought is a huge thing. 2 years ago, the checkbook has 200,000 less in it for the farm. You get 60, 70 bushel corn, you're used to 150. You get a $50,000 check from the insurance company. 50,000 buys the fuel. It's not enough to really go through it, but for help, I just don't know, so.
Thank you again for sharing your story. And if I remember correctly, you're also sort of an inventor, aren't you? Like a lot of the stuff that you're doing is stuff that you came up with on your own.
You know,
That's pretty cool, man. I have faith that everything's going to be okay with you, and I wish there was more that we could do to help. But it's an impressive operation, and I wish we could give some degree of certainty to you. But I know that's not what you sign up for when you're an entrepreneur or a farmer. But that's how we feel. Well, thank you both, gentlemen. Senator Westrom.
Chair.
Mr. Chair, just to follow up a little bit on the grain buying question regarding Wednesday. So do you buy from multiple farmers? Do you not pay cash at the time when they come in? How are you hooked by the current audit, if you know? And if you don't offhand, that's fine. I'm just trying to figure out what puts you under the requirements of an expensive audit?
Mr. Smitty?
Chair and Senator Westrom, I'm not on that side, or I have an operations manager that takes care of that, and my wife does, but for what I know, what is explained to us, that even though we buy from a licensed grain buyer with a bond, we still have to have it. I guess I was under the impression that it's the farmer, or when you buy directly from the farmer is when you need that license and bond. But they said that is not true. It doesn't matter who, anybody buying grain needs a bond with a license.
And Mr. Smoody, I think, Senator Westrom, the bill that we're going to consider on Wednesday, as I understand it, perhaps Senator Kupek could give us greater detail, is that it's going to exempt people who do less than $7 million worth of business from needing those additional audit requirements. And that's what we're going to discuss in order to sort of protect the smaller farmers who do those things. Senator Westrom. Okay, thanks. All right, folks, thanks very much. Very much appreciate you taking the time to come here and sharing both your wisdom and your snacks. We're grateful for both. Ms. Bernhardt, if you could, please. State your full name for the record and commence your testimony when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair Putnam and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Hannah Bernhardt, and I run a diversified livestock operation in Finlayson, Minnesota, not too far from Commissioner Peterson's farm in Pine County. As a farmer, I wanted to build on what MDA shared about state interactions with federal programs and how uncertainty on the federal level is affecting my farm, in hopes that it might help this committee think about how you can continue to help fill gaps and support farmers. So I'm a beginning farmer focusing on regenerative agriculture and soil health practices, and I direct market my meat to hundreds of customers in the Twin Cities and Duluth. I grew up on a corn and soybean farm in the 80s, so I have intentionally chosen to farm this way, to have control over setting my own price and to limit my reliance on expensive inputs. However, this also means that I operate without many of the safety nets available to commodity farmers. Instead, the federal programs that have benefited me have often been those promoting local and regional markets, conservation practices, and beginning farmer development programs in business training and education. The most immediate program that I use that's been affected by the funding freeze is the Local Food Purchasing Assistance Program. It's an incredible program that allowed me to sell my meat at my asking price to Twin Cities Food Justice, who in turn donated it to a meal program and a food bank in my own community that I got to help pick. It felt amazing to be able to feed those in need in my community, and I received so much gratitude and appreciation, including a thank you note from the food bank that said they had not had fresh meat to offer for almost a year. It was also a help to my operation because the purchases were made this time of year when my cash flow is otherwise low, and I didn't have to do the extra work of marketing, customer service, and delivery that normally takes up a large amount of my time. I was all set to sell 3 more beef to the LFPA program this March when I was informed that the funding freeze meant they would be unable to buy from me. I already have that butcher date lined up, and as we talked about, there is a bottleneck in processing, so there's no way I'm going to give up that butcher date. And now I'm worried about scrambling to find new customers to buy that beef. Additionally, I know other direct market farmers who are using the programs like Farm to School and benefiting from like the stability of those contracts. And right now, there's more demand for farm-to-school grants than there's funding available. And again, Commissioner Peterson mentioned that there was going to be additional funding from the local Food for Schools cooperative agreement with the USDA. So if that funding falls through, I would urge the state to continue investing in this program as a way to both support Minnesota farmers and feed our kids healthy food. It's really, truly a win-win. And now with fully funded school meals in Minnesota, there's really no reason why we shouldn't be directing taxpayer dollars back to our local economies and those farmers. Finally, I also have a natural resource conservation service, conservation stewardship program contract that's currently on hold. Farming, as you're probably aware, is a bit time sensitive, and I should be buying seed right now to frost seed my pastures in March when the ground thaws, but I now have no guarantee that that investment will be reimbursed at the end of the year. In the past, I've also used funding from the Minnesota Ag Water Quality Certification Program and the Soil and Water Conservation District to cost share projects that help improve my operation. And, you know, Commissioner Peterson also mentioned Minnesota is set to receive funding through RCPP to support those soil and water conservation districts for soil health projects and technical assistance. And I really want to emphasize that soil health and conservation provide major public benefits beyond just in supporting individual farms to stay viable. These programs keep everyone's water and air cleaner while helping farmers to raise healthy food on healthy soils and increase our public health. Unfortunately, my bottom line doesn't always allow me to justify making these conservation improvements on my own. And finally, with the staff cuts at FSA and NRCS that I'm hearing about, I'm also worried about having a harder time navigating resources and getting that technical assistance on conservation in what were already chronically underfunded agencies. It would be great if our state and county agencies could step in to fill these gaps. And I'll just end by saying that I hope the federal government will honor their commitments to farmers, who are some of the least wasteful people I know. It's really valuable to know what I can count on. When I sign a contract with the government, I should be able to plan ahead for my season and count on that. Thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bernhardt, and also thank you for having us out to visit your farm as well. If I recall correctly, you were starting some agritourism, because I remember the barn looking really cool. Are any of these changes or potential changes potentially consequential for that area of your business, or is it not implicated?
Chair Putnam, no. However, there are other programs that I use that are federally funded that I didn't mention because they're not state-federal partnerships. One that was super valuable to me last year was funding that came through the Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development Program that helped me hire staff for the first time. It paid me for my time to educate them as like an apprenticeship, and then it also helped boost their pay so that it wasn't such a huge burden on my bottom line to hire them. And having them gave me way more time to interact with customers at agritourism and also just helped me with burnout.
Thank you, Ms. Bernhardt. Members, we have questions for Ms. Bernhardt. Senator Kunish?
Thank you, Ms. Bernhardt. I was looking at your website. It's a really great website, by the way. And there's a lot of agridiversity of the work that you do. And one of them, just so folks know, there is the most adorable little pig on your pig page, but also the puppies, the livestock guardian dog puppies that obviously help you do the work that you do. You've really embraced the world of agriculture in a way that is just really, really lovely to me and really appeals to me in a lot of different ways. When you add up all of the funding that you had kind of counted on or that you had already expanded and expected to be reimbursed, what kind of effect would that have on you and your family and this, incredible environment, ecosystem that you've created?
Ms. Bernhardt?
Chair Putnam and Senator Kunish, I haven't added up the dollars, but I mean, I'm still a beginning farmer, under 10 years of farming, and just making ends meet in terms of cash flowing your operation is a challenge when you're starting. And it takes a long time, right, to pay off buying the amount of land that I needed to buy in order to have a big enough business to feel like I could make a living. And so while I'm able to set my own price and make sure that I'm covering at least my costs of production, there's been a lot of huge investments that I've made over the years that I'm going to be paying off for a long time. So anytime there's a program that can help, especially with infrastructure, it's huge. It helps me be more viable.
Members, any other questions?
Nope.
Senator Dames.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and Ms. Bernhardt. Can you tell me about what % of your operating, your short-term operating costs are covered by grants and things like that that you get from the federal or the state or other organizations?
Ms. Bernhardt?
Chair Putnam and Senator Doms. Again, I have a farm business management instructor meeting coming up next week, and then I could have probably told you the answer to that. You know, it's not huge, but it's enough to make the difference between worrying that I'm gonna run out of money in May when my cash flow is the lowest and knowing I'm gonna be okay.
Senator Dames? Thank you very much to the three of you. I very much appreciate you being here to share your stories with us, and I hope you know that we want to do everything we can do to help. There's a lot of anxiety that a lot of people are experiencing right now, an uncertainty. Independent of what the result of what happens in 2 or 3 weeks, we can't deny that that chaos and anxiety is something you're feeling right now. So we're here for you, and thanks for being here. Members, we're sort of running out of time. We have 2 more agenda items, so I'm going to ask us to meld them together because we're talking about food. So Ms. Witherspoon and Mr. Rodwald and Ms. Lenars-Coy, if you could all 3 please come up to the table. We'll start with our friends from Second Harvest. Ms. Witherspoon, if you would please state your full name for the record, commence your testimony. I am going to ask us to be as efficient as we possibly could because we got about 25 minutes to hear from all 3 of you, and I know you've got a lot to share.
Hi, I'm Virginia Witherspoon. I'm the Executive Director at Channel 1 Regional Food Bank, a close partner of Second Harvest Heartland. We're both Feeding America food banks. And we're here today to talk about the impact of the federal programs on our food bank. So very briefly, food banks bring in food from everywhere, growers, producers, manufacturers, and we redistribute that food to food shelves that give the food directly to the people. There's 3 programs that impact food banks. The Emergency Food Assistance Program, that's TFAP, that's government commodity food, and then the Commodity Supplemental Food Program, CSFP, that's commodity food in boxes for seniors. And then what you've heard a lot about today, the Local Food Purchase Assistance Program, or LFPA, where there's funding to pay farmers to grow food that then goes to people who need it. So at Channel 1, we actually directly had an LFP grant for $125,000, and we have $77,000 left on that grant. So that's food that we're not able to buy to give to the people that need it the most. A great example is that we were buying chicken from a small chicken farm every week, and we're owed $10,000 because we have to advance the money, and we are not getting reimbursed for that. So we had to immediately stop buying the chicken for the food shelf. Some of our smaller food shelf partners across southeast Minnesota also had LFPA grants and are impacted. One food shelf, that was their plan to use that money for all of their protein, and they're not able to do that anymore. Another nonprofit, a group of farmers in Rochester, are currently owed $83,000. They laid off half of their staff, and they were expecting $33,000 of purchases for us that we don't know will happen. And like the farmers talked about today, they're trying to plan and buy their seed, and we can't guarantee them that we'll be able to purchase from them. Another potential impact is the Commodity Credit Corporation funding, or CCC. That is additional funding to buy additional TFAP food. So in calendar year 2024, 38% of Channel 1's TFAP food was CCC, and 58% of that was meat, fish, and poultry. Those protein items are so important to our shoppers. We measure food in pounds in food banking, but a pound of retail rescued candy and chips, while we appreciate it, is not as important to our shoppers as that protein is. The CCC we received in 2024 was 828,000 pounds, and that has a cash value of almost $2 million. And that's 5% of all food that we received at our food bank. And so 5% may not seem like that much, but when you've got 1 in 5 households in Minnesota are food insecure, that 5% is a big deal, especially given how good that food is, high quality protein and produce. Second Harvest Heartland, in partnership with Wilder and the other food banks, did a food insecurity survey. And what we know now is, I want to point you to the 13% number. 13% of Minnesotans are relying on support, including food shelf and food banks, to be food secure. And we're under so much pressure right now. Our donated food is down. The number of people that we need, that we're serving, is at all-time highs. And then now we're concerned about these government programs and how much of that food we're going to get. And I know we're short on time, so I think we'd be happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. That was very efficient. Members, do we have questions, comments? For Ms. Witherspoon? Senator Gustafson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was hesitating because I know we are short on time. So I just, I'm concerned. One of the things, I'm as the author of Universal School Meals, and I agree, I'm also the author of the farm to school bills that we've heard and passed the last few years. There is a huge connection between what we grow here in Minnesota and how that benefits our kids in schools. And I also know that a lot of our food banks are struggling even before the threat of federal funding freeze. So what I guess I'm wondering is, when will you, what is your plan should some of the funding be frozen? And what is your plan to make sure that we can still keep our food banks stocked with the food that Minnesotans need?
Thank you. It's a very tough situation. We're already making decisions, like at Channel 1, we've stopped buying eggs because they're too expensive. So we'll have to start getting, and we just found out today that 3 loads of eggs, which is 800 in some cases for us, got canceled through TFAP because the price went up 3 times since they were ordered. So we're not buying the high quality things that we want to buy. We're having to make hard decisions, and we'll have to start limiting food if it comes down to it. We're pulling every lever we can. At Channel 1, we increased our retail rescue 40% last year. That's when we take our trucks to grocery stores. So we're trying to increase rescue. We're doing everything we can, but it feels like our back's against the wall with just the huge need on top of having these programs potentially go away.
Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One last question. If you don't know the answer, I hate to put you on the spot. Do you know what the percentage is of senior citizens that use the food banks across the state or food shelves, and also maybe school-aged children? And again, if you don't know, it's okay to say that. I know I'm putting you on the spot.
I don't know, but we can find that answer for you.
Thank you, Ms. Witherspoon. Now, Mr. Rodvald, if you would, from Second Harvest, if you'd state your full name for the record and commence your testimony already, please.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Chair and members. I'm Zach Rodwald, Director of Public Affairs for Second Harvest Heartland. And in the interest of time, I think I'm going to defer to our partners here at the food group and let Sophia.
Thank you, Mr. Rodvald. Ms. Linares-Coy, if you would, please.
Chair Putnam, members of the committee, thanks so much for the opportunity to testify today. I'm Sophia Linares-Coy. I'm the Executive Director of the Food Group. I'm going to talk really briefly about what the Food Group does, just to set context about how the federal freeze is affecting us. So we really have four main areas of work. We are a food bank. We're not part of Feeding America, but work closely with our fabulous colleagues here. But in addition to our anti-hunger work, we have affordable grocery programs, we do advocacy and community engagement, and we have an incubator farm that's really focused on land-based education for new and emerging farmers. So I want to really focus on that area of our work, although there is certainly a lot of dire possibilities on the federal funding side of the anti-hunger side as well. But we have a grant from USDA through an ARPA program to provide technical assistance. And it is a 4-year grant that we received in January of 2023 for $2.3 million. It was for us, but also for several smaller organizations that don't always have the capacity to apply for federal grants. And really, it was about the fact that we here, and I know members of your committee are aware that there's a lot of people who want to get into farming, right? And we know we have a great farm economy in Minnesota, and we also know that the average age of farmers is maybe older than we want, so having new people want to come into farming is a really good thing. But building up the capacity and infrastructure to help folks do that requires funding. And so we were so excited to get this grant and do work with The Village, which is an organization in Rochester, in Virginia's area, the Sudanese Farming Group based in Northfield and New Hope, and also SAFI, the Somali American Farming Institute based out of Minneapolis. And our objective was the same, really increasing capacity, providing technical assistance to help folks start sustainable farm businesses and help those folks actually access USDA programs so that they could be sustainable and great small business owners far into the future. What's a little wild is that we were doing that work. It's a 4-year grant. We have plans. We were doing work. It's a reimbursement grant, only to find out at the end of January we were not able to be reimbursed. So this is obviously devastating. It's devastating for the food group, but we are in a more privileged position as an organization that we have diversified revenue streams. But as Virginia mentioned, The Village in Rochester, a much smaller community-based organization doing work, had to lay off staff. This couldn't come at a worse time for planning for the season, right? We are in the time where we are making plans, we are staffing up, we're figuring out what farmers need to be successful in terms of their crop planning, their access to markets. So even at the food group, we had a new program we were really excited about, bringing first-year farmers together to cooperatively farm a 1/4 of an acre instead of giving everybody their own plot, just so that they could really learn hands-on how to start seeds in the greenhouse, how to develop markets, how to crop plan without some of the risk of having their own 1/4 acre. But it seems kind of crazy to hire a staff person right now when we have no idea if we will have that funding again, and we have had absolutely no communication from USDA. So everyone is completely in a holding pattern. We are in close contact with the Attorney General's office as well. It's one thing to hear that this isn't how this should go. It's a really different thing to financially have to adjust to the reality that we're seeing. So we are really appreciative for all of you caring about this work and hearing what's happening. But this uncertainty for smaller organizations, coupled with the market access disruptions that LFPA is causing, is really making it so a lot of small-scale specialty crop producers just have no certainty, right, in a business that's already incredibly uncertain. And again, in the nonprofit landscape, just to zoom out a little bit, multi-year federal funding is like the best that we can do, right? A lot of our fundraising in nonprofits is year to year. We do our best. We rely on fabulous, generous individuals, corporate organizations. Having a multi-year signed contract with the federal government should not be an uncertain part of our federal funding landscape. And that's the situation we find ourselves in right now.
Thank you, Ms. Leonard-Cohen. Members, do we have questions for our food friends or comments? You don't have to, but Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just always feel bad when people come and then I don't ask you a question. I don't have a question. I hear how serious it is, and I also am very afraid. I know in my community, we only have a food bank that is open, just in Vadnais Heights where I live, once a month, and the line is around the block. And they're getting their food from you. So, and then in White Bear Lake, we do have some really good resources. We have a community market. I don't know if you know about it, but people should come and tour it sometime. It's pretty special. But all of these places depend on you. And so when you say that you're worried, I'm worried. And I just, let us know how we can help. But we know that it's a lot of chaos, a lot of uncertainty right now. We can do what we can, but it's just know that we're with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Gustafson. You know, just if you'll indulge me for a moment, I was in Target on University Ave yesterday, and the toothpaste aisle is locked up. Glass boxes, secure cases for toothpaste, because that's what people are shoplifting now. That's the world that we're in right now. People are hurting. And if they're stealing toothpaste, they need food too. So thank you for being there for those people and for the work you do. And again, anything we can do to help you, I'm sure you'll let us know, because we feel that need. We do. So members, no further questions or comments for these testifiers? Thank you, folks. Well, we do have one other individual here who might have some things that they'd like to share. Tom Johnson from the PCA is here. Ms. Johnson, if you'd like to come down. Because we have 7 minutes left, Mr. Johnson. So if you could please state your full name for the record and tell us a little bit about some things that are on your mind.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. For the record, my name is Tom Johnson. I am the Government Relations Director for the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. And again, we just want to communicate how incredible the Inflation Reduction Act has been for Minnesota, particularly the climate pollution reduction grants and the climate smart food systems grant that the state received with a total of $200 million. Commissioner Peterson and Michelle did an excellent job talking through some of the pieces that the Department of Agriculture is set to receive from that grant opportunity, from that grant award. But Mr. Chair, just trying to remember my password here so I can talk a little bit more about the other pieces of the food system that could be impacted here by if this award is not unfrozen. So aside from the around $26 million or so that's set aside directly for the Department of Agriculture that I have in my notes here, there's also $60 million of this $200 million is for food system industrial innovation grants. And so that's both for our friends in industrial agriculture, but also for in organic waste systems and other industrial infrastructure that's used in our food systems. There's also over $30 million, $33 million that's going towards, as you've been hearing about, the prevention of wasted food. And so this is both wasted food and organics management, but looking at around at least, I'm seeing around $13 million for the prevention of wasted food and food rescue. So funneling directly into the type of work that you were just hearing about from the great folks at Second Harvest and others. And then also some more infrastructure-related needs around investing in more sustainable refrigerants for our food systems, both in the trucking world and at commercial food sites, large commercial sites, as well as the types of vehicle replacements, not only directly for for farmers and equipment for farmers that the Department of Agriculture was referencing, but also for food system vehicle and equipment replacement grants, so sort of that larger infrastructure need of trucking our food from place to place. So really, the grant that we received from the EPA and through the Inflation Reduction Act, and that is really looking at our whole food system. And unfortunately, the freeze that we're experiencing right now is really slowing down what we could be doing as a state to really revolutionize those systems.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Members, any questions or comments? I appreciate you coming to share the perspective of yourself and your agency today, Mr. Johnson. It's yet another bit of evidence about how a lot of these concerns are interconnected. They don't live in one jurisdiction, and they don't live in one person's house. We're all connected in some very profound ways, and our conversation today, I think, helps us understand that a little bit better. So thank you again, Mr. Johnson. So members, that's the end of our official business for the day. I do want to tell you what we're doing on Wednesday. It is Pork Producers Day on the Hill and Soybean Growers Day on the Hill. So it's pork and beans. We're going to start with a little bit of that. We'll hear from each of those organizations just briefly. They're basically just saying hi. And then we will talk about funding Second Harvest. Second Harvest Heartland will be a focus of our conversation. We'll hear bills, very similar bills by Senator Kupek and Senator Abler. My intention is that they present them together in the bipartisan spirit that's necessary to tackle hunger. And so they will talk about their initiatives. Then Senator Kupek will talk to us a little bit about financial reporting requirements for grain buyers. Senator Gustafson will talk a little bit about farm to school and early care programs. And then Senator Lang will be here to talk to us about meat, poultry, egg, and milk processing facilities. Thanks very much, everybody. There being no further order business before the committee, we are adjourned.
Thank you.